welcome back to Broken and Brilliant. I'm here with Melinda Cadwallader.
Yes.
Did I say it right
You
this
said
time?
it right.
Okay,
You got
good.
it right.
And we have a very special guest today. I'm so excited. This is Shannon Ethridge. Shannon is a 1 million copy best-selling author. Did I say that right?
You did.
Okay, cool. But even more than that, she is my friend and she is my coach. Shannon is my life coach that I have been working with for about 2 years and almost weekly for about 2 years. She coaches me both personally and professionally, but we've known each other for about 4 years, and I went through a program with her called Blast that I'm going to let her tell you about in just a minute. But Shannon, welcome. Thank you so much for being our first guest.
You bet. I'm absolutely delighted. You know, I've been your biggest cheerleader as you've been brainstorming all these different ministry avenues, and I am delighted that you're doing this, Carrie. You were made for this.
Well, thank you.
Yes.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? And as we've talked about with this podcast, the idea is to talk to different people who have been through really difficult times where they really felt broken in their lives. And then somehow they made it through to the other side and they're feeling brilliant these days. I know you have a story, and I would love for you to share with us. Pick a story, any story, but I think I know the one you're going to talk about. Would you mind sharing some of your life story with us?
Sure. Well, to tell you a little bit about myself, I live in Tyler, Texas. I've been married to Greg Ethridge for the past 24 years. The day that we're recording this is Valentine's Day, so I realized that we've just spent 25 Valentine's Days together, so that's kind of cool for me today. We have an almost 22-year-old daughter and an almost 19-year-old son. I told God that I wanted a girl and a boy 3 years apart. He only missed that by 48 hours. Their birthdays are literally 2 days apart, and they're 3 years apart. And right now, we're just in a really blessed season of savoring these last few years that we've had them at home. They've both chosen to go to college here locally and stay living at home to save money. We just found out that my daughter got a full ride scholarship to University of Tennessee at Knoxville to work on her master's in fine art. So she'll be leaving us this fall. Wow. And hopefully our son will find his way in sports journalism is what he wants to do. But we just love cheering our kids on to just pursue their dreams. And my husband is a CPA, which makes my life a lot easier running a ministry and being an entrepreneur. I say I haven't had to balance a checkbook in 25 years, but I do. I choose to. But I love how he can manage the financial and business end of our ministry so that I can focus on the people end and the writing end. It's a beautiful, beautiful match. God gave me exactly what I needed in a husband. So the program that you were referring to, Carrie, I'll tell folks a little bit about. It's called Blast, and it stands for Building Leaders, Authors, Speakers, and Teachers. And we started it in 2009 in response to people like you who approached me at Glen Eyrie Retreat Center when my husband and I were doing a marriage conference. I remember you and I sitting down at lunch and you opening up and sharing with me a little bit about your story. And I remember being totally blown away and thinking, she needs to be sharing this story with so many people. And I just remember thinking, God, how can I help her get this story out? And we had actually just launched the Blast program back then. So it's a 1-year online mentorship program. So you can do it from anywhere in the world. So the fact that you were in Colorado and I was in Texas made no difference.
Well, and you know, I was put into a group with 4 people, and one other was in Texas and the other one was back east. And then a friend of mine was here in Colorado. So we were all over the place.
Yeah. And sometimes you get put in a group with somebody in New Zealand or Europe But yeah, folks from all over the world who have a story to tell or who have a vision for a book that they want to write, who have a ministry that they want to launch, a speaking platform that they want to establish, or maybe they have a speaking platform already and they just want to know how to enlarge that and reach more people. But I often ask myself throughout the heyday of the Every Woman's Battle series, which that's the series that sold over 1 million copies. I often ask myself, God, why have you allowed me to experience this amazing privilege of being so successful in the publishing industry, in the ministry world. And I really sensed God saying, it's because I knew you couldn't keep it to yourself. That Shannon, you're such an exhibitionistic person, and I knew you would want to share these secrets with the world. And so, yeah, I remember one time I was sitting over a lunch table with Gary Smalley, Kay Arthur, Valerie Burton, Michelle McKinney-Hammond. There were several of us authors sitting around this lunch table. We were all speaking together at a conference in Branson. It was a John Maxwell conference. And Gary Smalley said that he had done a Google search on his own name, a vanity search, just to see what came up. And I love it that a man can admit that, you know. And then he said he started wondering, okay, well, if I go to Amazon, like how many books are available on Amazon? And the number is astronomical. It's like 800,000 or something. And then he said, I wondered what percentage of those books have ever sold more than 10,000 copies. And it was like, you know, less than 1%. And then he wanted to know how many have ever sold over 100,000 copies. And it was a fraction of a fraction. And then he said, you know, when he Googled how many have ever sold over 1 million copies, you know, fraction of a fraction of a fraction. And he looked around the table at all of us. And he said, you realize that so many of us here at this table have accomplish that feat. But my challenge to you is, why would God entrust that level of success to you? And what are you doing to be a good steward of that kind of opportunity, to have that kind of impact on the world? And so that was really kind of, I don't want to say it was a burden, but it was certainly a wake-up call to the fact that I have had very unique opportunities to work with top publishers, to work with top editors, to work with top marketing coaches and media coaches, and that I can't keep that to myself. So I love sharing that with aspiring writers and speakers through the BLAST program. And folks can learn more about that at www.blastmentoring.com. So that is one of my greatest joys. But as you said, I also have a backstory to that.
Yes.
And it's a brilliance that was certainly born out of brokenness, for sure. Because Gary Smalley was not the first person to put a burden of responsibility on my shoulders to carry. That mantle was actually given to me when I was 16 years old. So kind of the way that it happened is I was on my way to school. It was the third day of my junior year of high school. And I got about 1.5 miles away from my parents' house. And I remembered that I hadn't put lipstick on. And so I adjusted the rearview mirror for a quick application. And in those split seconds that I had taken my eyes off the road, my car hit something. And I thought maybe it was a farm animal out of its pasture or something. But by the time I got my car stopped and ran back to see what I had hit, I just stood there in shock over the body of a curly-headed woman lying face down in the grass next to a mangled bicycle. And to realize that I had been the one who'd just done that to her almost took me to my knees. But I knew that I couldn't waste time. So I ran to the nearest house, but nobody was home and the door was locked. So I got back in my car. I drove to the next nearest house. It was out in the country where houses are really far apart. And I dialed 911 for an ambulance. And then I called my mom. And I just said, drive down the road until you see me. And that's all that I had the heart to tell her. And we went back to the scene of that accident. And other people had stopped. And a man came charging at me when he saw my car. And he said, are you the one who did this to her? And I said, yes, sir, I was. But it was not a hit and run. I only left to go call an ambulance. And one is on its way. And my mother and I were just standing there holding each other, sobbing and trembling and praying up a storm. And the ambulance finally arrived 45 minutes later.
Oh, man.
Yeah. And the paramedic examined her and then looked at me and coldly explained, I'm sorry, you'll have to call a funeral home ambulance. There's nothing we can do here. Wow. So I felt as if that 45 minutes of praying up a storm had been spent totally in vain. And I went back to my parents' house and I laid down on the couch and I just remember sobbing so hard and asking God, how could you have let this happen? That I must have just passed out. And what woke me up a little bit later was a police officer knocking on the door asking to question me. And after he questioned me, I went out to my driveway and was looking at the condition of my car and just trying to envision how this all happened. And Carrie, I was shocked at how the passenger side roof line was now touching the back seat floorboard. Oh. The impact was that severe. And I thought, if any of my friends had asked for a ride to school that morning, as they often did, they would have been split in half. Mm-hmm. And then I realized if my car had just been a few inches further to the right, I would have been split in half. But I had come out of that car wreck without even a nick or a scratch. Well, then my mother called me into the house saying that you have a phone call. And I took the call, and it was their neighbor. It was the neighbor of the woman that I had just hit. And he said, Shannon, I want to tell you that I drove to McKinney, Texas to tell Marjorie's husband. Her name was Marjorie Jarsfer. He said, I told her husband that she had been killed in a car accident by a 16-year-old driver. And he said, Shannon, I think you need to know the first words that came out of his mouth in response to this news is, how is the girl? And does she realize it's not her fault? Wow. And I was like, how in the world? How is he even thinking about me at a time like this? And my dad was so afraid that they would be so upset that they would, sue us for everything that we have. And I stood to be charged for involuntary manslaughter. And the compassion that this man showed was just so overwhelming. The caller explained that he wanted, that the husband wanted me to come to their home the next night, the night before the funeral, and meet the rest of the family. Nothing in me wanted to go to this home and face these people.
I can't even imagine that.
Yeah, but how do you turn down that invitation? Excuse me, I'm going to have to, Yeah, I can't tell the story without crying, and I've learned that it's just okay.
Well, especially when you think about all the feelings and emotions that he's entitled to.
Yes.
He's absolutely entitled to, but he chose not to hold that. That's
right.
That's just unheard of. It's so unheard of.
And also the feelings of his adult children. They had just moved their youngest off to grad school like we're about to do. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, as I'm going through the season with my own daughter, I think, how would they respond if someone killed me out of negligence? That I can't imagine someone being this merciful. But, my parents were in chaos. I mean, it was just, there was nothing pretty about this situation at all. But yet, it was turned into something beautiful. I went over the next night, and as I knocked on the door, it just came open. And down this entry corridor, I see this big, burly, middle-aged man in a flannel shirt, and he comes running toward me, not with any animosity in his eyes at all, but just with his arms open wide. And he scooped me up in the warmest embrace, and he just let me cry all over his flannel shirt, and he cried his own tears all over the top of my head. I just kept saying, I'm so sorry. What else do you say? I just kept apologizing over and over. And finally he said, come on in here to the living room. I want to introduce you to some people. And he introduced me to two of his adult children. One was still on their way into town, and his pastor. And then he sat me down in the bay window of their home, and he said, Shannon, I invited you over here tonight because I want to tell you about Marjorie's life. He said, Marjorie has had such an intimate relationship with the Lord for so long that she's actually sensed that he would be calling her home soon. He said she left for that bike ride every morning as if it might be the last time she ever sees me. She would give me a hug and a kiss. And he said this particular morning when I got the phone call that I needed to just stay where I was, that Jerry Spate, his neighbor, was on his way, he said, I wondered if it was something with Marjorie. And he said, I wondered if God had indeed called her home. And he said the whole way that he was driving back to Greenville from McKinney, which is about a 45-minute drive, and he insisted on driving himself, he said God was just so dealing with him, saying, now, Gary, I have forgiven you so many times for so many things. And he said, you have the power to make or break this girl's entire life by your response. And I want you to show her the same forgiveness that I have shown you over and over. And so what he said to me is, Shannon, I don't want this to ruin your life. He said, I want you to learn to love Jesus without limits the way that Marjorie did. He said, Marjorie embraced her role as the bride of Christ. And he said, I want you to do the same. He said, in fact, I'm passing Marjorie's legacy of being a godly woman on to you.
Wow.
Yeah, so I go over there expecting to be cursed and burdened like crazy, and yet I am blessed like crazy. And it didn't stop there. I mean, this man continued to pursue me, to check in on me, to call, to follow up. And here we are 30 years later, and we are still very, very close. I visit them whenever I'm out, and he lives in North Carolina now. He visits me. We call on occasion, we write letters. It's just amazing to me how this whole experience has bonded me to a family who has shown me God's unconditional love like nothing else I could have imagined. Yeah. And it was through that experience that I realized that I need to learn more about what it is to embrace my role as the bride of Christ. Because at the time, as a 16-year-old girl, I was looking for love in all the wrong.
Well, and you're not thinking about being the bride of Christ.
Nope. Wasn't thinking about being a bride at all. Yeah, just being in the back seat with your boyfriend was more of what I had in mind. And so it was just a huge wake-up call. And I can't say that it was like overnight of, wow, I was radically transformed. I woke up the next day and recommitted my virginity and all that. But over time, as I just continued to meditate and contemplate on the opportunity that God had given me to have a glimpse into his true character and nature through this absolutely tragic circumstance, I didn't want to take that lightly. I really wanted to pursue knowing God more intimately. So I started studying scripture and looking for all the passages that referred to us as the bride of Christ and looking for how Jesus is referred to as a heavenly bridegroom. And so after I had written the Every Woman's Battle series about sexual integrity, about not looking for love in the wrong places, my publisher asked, is there anything else you want to write? And I said, yeah, I want to teach women how to look for love in the right place, in an intimate relationship with Jesus. So when I sat down to write the first book in the series called Completely His, and then there are 4 devotionals that follow. It's Completely His is the lead book, and then Completely Loved, Completely Forgiven, Completely Blessed, and Completely Irresistible. And I was completely exhausted after writing all 5 of those in 1 year.
Oh my God.
But I asked myself, how do I start this book? How do I tell people, why I think that this is so important? And I realized I have to start with the car accident. And so I called the Jarstfer family and asked their permission to share all of that in that book. And they were very honored. And we are so blessed. And it sounds weird to say that, but we're blessed to have the opportunity that so oftentimes people will contact me to say, would you be willing to talk to this person? This is the accident that just happened. They were behind the wheel. They're beating themselves up. They're thinking about committing suicide. Would you please help them understand that life isn't over for them just because they accidentally killed someone or whatever? I've probably had about 20 opportunities over the past 30 years to minister to someone directly that way, to give them hope that, if you hold on, you may be surprised at what kind of lemonade God turns these lemons into, but you can't let this ruin your life either. You really can go from broken to brilliant if you give your pain to God.
Well, Shannon, that was one of the reasons I wanted to have you on, because we've all had really, really tough times. Some maybe not quite as extreme as what you've faced or what other people have faced, but everybody struggles with something. And I think a lot of times when you're in the middle of it, you see somebody who's successful like you, and you think, oh, well, her life's just been easy, and she's just... And when you go back to the backstory, it's like, well, why does she write on sexual intimacy and intimacy with God? Where did that even come from? Why in the world would you start writing all of these books? And it's out of that deep pain, and actually that this man called that out in you. Yeah. And I just think that is such an amazing thing. It's like God giving you your calling through this man.
I'm so glad that you recognize that, because I have often said, while I would never, want to live that day again, I'm so thankful that if I had to go through it, that I went through it with that family, because the blessing that I came out with of just knowing and understanding God's character and nature so much more deeply, I wouldn't trade that for $1 billion. And if I had to go through that kind of pain in order to get that kind of glimpse, then it was well worth it. And I don't mean that to minimize the family's pain. I don't mean that to minimize Marjorie's life or death. I have grieved that woman through the years. I have visited her grave. I have written letters to her. I have prayed for her family, for her. So I'm not saying I'm glad it happened. I'm just saying that I am so glad that we serve a God who is big enough to take a tragedy like that and turn it into a triumph. I mean, as we share this story with other people, you'd be amazed at what they will come forward and repent of, and just the bitterness that they're just like, I'm ready to let go of that. I don't want to keep dragging this around. That they realize that God may have a higher purpose for their pain, and they're ready to embrace God's higher purpose. And so I guess I do have to say that I'm thankful for it. The Bible says we can rejoice in our sufferings because sufferings produces perseverance and character and hope does not disappoint us. And I know that I have hope that I've gone through all of this for a reason. And that if God needed me to experience that to prepare me for the calling that he had on my life, then I can embrace that. I can embrace what I can't erase. I can never erase the fact that I accidentally killed a person, but I can trust that God was sovereign that day. It caught me by surprise and everybody else, but it did not catch God by surprise. And he had a purpose in that. And Gary and I's favorite passage of scripture, Gary Jarsfer, is that all things work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to his purpose. It doesn't say the good things work for our good. It says all things, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so I'm privileged to get to share that story with so many people through the platform of writing and speaking. It's an amazing day and age that we live in, that we have all this technology and all this ability to reach people with whatever experience we've had or whatever story God's laid on our heart.
Well, I always think that you have this huge platform and everybody must know you. But when I talk to people, many people have never heard of you, especially here in Colorado.
I'm not a celebrity.
No.
I'm a servant. I am not a celebrity by any stretch of the imagination.
So, when I was thinking about asking you to tell this story, it's like, well, she's told it, so maybe everybody's heard it. And it's like, no.
Well, even before when Carrie had mentioned you, and I Googled you because I wanted to know more about you and what you were doing, and I was so refreshed to hear, first of all, with the Blast program that you have, because I feel I've written some things and I speak here and there, but what I find is a lot of women who are the generation or two above me and ahead of me, that I've tried to seek out mentorship, where they feel they're mentoring me is, well, read my book here and read my book here. And there's a difference between standing in front of and teaching and walking alongside of and mentoring. It's the difference between a doctor who delivers your baby and a midwife who stands by your side and helps you deliver your baby. And it's so refreshing because now I know that I'm definitely going to be talking to you very soon because I need you. And there's so many of us in my generation, in our 30s, and who are looking for this and looking for mentorship that isn't always available because, like you said, you have learned and you've come all this way and you have all these great experiences, but why shouldn't I go through my own experience to get where you've already gone through? And the fact that you have that heart of mentorship, it's so transparent and it's beautiful.
Well, Shannon, I remember asking you, or somebody in the Blast program asked you, why do you do this? And you said you've gotten criticism from some other people out there because they're like, why are you giving away all the secrets? We all had to learn it. Let them, figure it out themselves. Yeah. And I remember your response. When I've come to some of the Blast things that we've done down in Texas, I'm always amazed that so many people have very similar stories to you, not the car accident story, but the stuff that you're talking about with intimacy and marriage and sexuality and brokenness in that regard. And you're not threatened by that. A lot of other authors, I wrote that book. You're like, you said 100 books could be written on this, and it still wouldn't be enough to reach the number of people that need to be reached.
Right. And sexuality is so multifaceted. You could never write all that could be written about the topic. But yeah, somebody asked me one time, why are you training up your competition? And I just looked at them and said, why in the world would you think that we're in competition? We're all on the same team.
Yeah.
Like, we're all serving the same God. And if God is raising up an army of not just female, but, speakers, but, I do want to particularly say that we are living in a great day and age that women are finally having a voice through writing, through speaking, because 100 years ago, we wouldn't have these opportunities. Right. So, the BLAST program is for both men and women, but, I love mentoring women, especially because this is how God speaks. God doesn't speak around us or in spite of us. He speaks through us. So helping people find their voice, recognizing their niche in the marketplace, what do they have to offer that other people haven't yet, or that they just have a unique spin on it. Like there's tons of Dave Ramsey type financial people out there, but does that mean that there's no financial problems that anyone has anymore? No, there's always room for financial coaches and fitness coaches and spiritual coaches and sexuality coaches and relationship coaches. And so to equip people to just follow their passion and put themselves out there without fear that, people are going to just think that I think this is all about me. Well, without marketing yourself, a really sad thing happens. Nothing. So you have to get over that fear of what other people are going to think and just do what God created you to do, and do it with boldness and confidence. And that is so much of what the BLAST program is all about, because there's not a college that has a class on how to become an author and a speaker or how to impact the world, but yet this is how to do it. It's through words. God chose words to communicate himself to his people. And we still have the opportunity to use words, either the spoken word or the written word or the Skyped word or whatever, to impact people's lives and to help them have paradigm shifts and to look at their own spiritual lives or their sexual lives or their health or their marriage or their family or whatever. We stand to have such a positive impact and so many ripple effects on society. So I just encourage both women and men, take advantage of what we've been given, all these tools that we have to get published or to be a speaker, to have a website or to have a radio broadcast or whatever. If you feel like that's what you've been created to do, then do it. Do it. Nobody's holding you back, and nobody needs to write you a permission slip. If you need one, contact me, and I'll write you a permission slip.
Shannon, you gave me my permission slip, and we were sitting at a table at Glen Erie, and I was broken, and I was telling you the story of our son, and probably sobbing. I don't remember, because that was the time that I couldn't ever get through it without sobbing.
I was sobbing with you, though. It was really touching me very deeply.
Well, we were talking, and I was saying, I did want to write about it, and I didn't know if I could. And I'd never written anything before, which who has before they do? Nobody.
Right.
You have to do it to have said you've done it. I was not speaking, but I had been speaking in the past. And then this happened with our son, and I felt totally disqualified. I felt like I had just taken myself out. My dreams of having a ministry were gone. I did not believe that I was qualified anymore after I had relinquished my child. It's like, well, you just knocked yourself right out of that one. You can't, I think that's the same way a lot of people who end up divorced feel. Right. I've just now taken myself out. I can't ever have a platform again. And it's just not true, So I met you, I joined the BLAST program, but not only that, I switched my degree program. I was in grad school at the time. I don't know if you remember. I was going here to a local college, which was a wonderful, beautiful program. But realizing at my age, I did not want to sit in a counseling office day after day for, 8 hours a day. I did want
We're not all built that way.
No, that's not me. I have a lot of different things I want to do. Very complex and fun and film and podcast
creative.
And writing. Yes, creative. And you encouraged me, and I ended up going back to Liberty and got my degree, same one that you got, and then you encouraged me to do the life coaching. It's like, okay, I'm kind of following you a little bit, but we have totally different
even
different
with the haircut, we're mimicking each other.
And now we look the
like
same.
Twins.
I hope you're not
at birth.
I hope you're not thinking I'm a creeper or a stalker.
Well, actually, you may have gotten the haircut first. Maybe you've become my icon.
It goes back and forth, So, hair? No, I'm just kidding.
I've been there. This is the growing out of what you have. So.
Yes, absolutely. I saw your picture too on Facebook from when you shaved your head.
Yes. So this is the longest.
Oh, wow. You got to share about that experience at some point, Melinda.
She did that on her on the last podcast, so we'll have to listen to that one if you didn't catch it. But anyway, well, Shannon, it has been such a joy. Thank you so much for joining us here today.
You bet. You are so welcome, Carrie. I'm so proud of you. And Melinda, thank you so much for catching the vision and coming alongside of her. And I know there's going to be great synergy in y'all's partnership.
Well, I'm absolutely inspired by what you're doing too, and I know that you are going to continue to impact people, and I'm excited to see like what you can bring into my life, and I'm excited to work with you and talk with you more, because there is such a need for women like you to be very matriarchal and showing us all how to lead up the people who share your passion and share your desire and break that competition. It's so important that we do that. Just like you said, this door is opening, but we have to learn how to come in together as women so we're not fighting against ourselves in everything that God has in store for us. So thank you.
Yep, we're all on the same team.
Yeah. And one last thing I just wanted to say is, it did take courage on my part to reach out to you and say, hey, could I do this? Is this something I could do? But you received it. And I just want to encourage people, sometimes you look at and you see somebody, whoever it is, out there, and you may think, oh, well, that's out of my league, or that's out of my range, or that's not for people like me. But I'm doing it all the time. And, just make a phone call or send an email or connect on Facebook.
Yep. I remember you were so sheepish. You were wondering, is there any way that I could be accepted into the program? You had no idea that you were going to wind up being like my gold star pupil. Like you're my cream that rises to the top and has taken all this information and galloping with it, and more power to you, girlfriend. I'm so, so proud of you.
Well, thank you. It's so fun to talk to you. I want to say, well, bye. I hope we talk again soon, but I know we will. So I'll coach with you next week. Thank you, Shannon.
Thank you.
God bless you, ladies.
You too. Bye-bye.